One young factory painter looks perfectly healthy. Another woman's jaw has stopped healing. They are not the same person, but the connection between them is real. How can painting numbers smaller than your fingernail end with bone dying inside the mouth? Nothing about the job looks violent. There is no blade, no furnace, no crushing machine. The answer begins with something much smaller. A fine brush, a glowing dial, and the moment the brush touches your lips. Go back to Orange, New Jersey, around 1920. You enter a bright production room lined with long benches. Most of the painters around you are young women. Heads lean over trays. Hands move in tight, careful patterns. New painters learn by watching the technique around them, so the room itself becomes part classroom, part production line. The work demands control, and that makes it attractive. No obvious danger announces itself. This is skilled factory work connected to a celebrated new material, and piecework can make it pay comparatively well. Piecework means accepted dials determine what you earn. A steady hand matters, speed matters, a clean numeral matters. At your bench, those pressures all point in the same direction, make each mark smaller, sharper, and faster. What leaves this room seems almost magical. A watch can be read in darkness without a lamp. So can an instrument dial. No match has to be struck. No battery has to illuminate the face. The paint contains radioactive material mixed with a phosphor, often something like zinc sulfide. Radiation excites that phosphor, and the phosphor produces the visible light. The radium-bearing material is the energy source. The phosphor makes that energy visible. The exact formulas vary, but the promise is simple. Time that reveals itself in the dark. Finished dials move away from the painters toward inspection, watches, instruments, and customers. Their usefulness is real. That matters, because the hidden cost is not attached to a pointless product. It grows inside a modern industry built around something people genuinely want. At your station, the miracle arrives as very small objects. A paper dial, a fine brush, a tiny vessel. Luminous powder is combined with water and gum arabic, a binder that works like a glue. The mixture has to remain wet enough to spread, but controlled enough to stay inside each tiny stroke. Too much makes a swollen numeral. Too little makes a broken one. The material is valuable, so little of it can be wasted. Your fingers steady the dial while the brush enters the wet paint. You begin a numeral. For a moment, the line is clean. Then the bristles spread. A brush that looks sharp at normal distance is suddenly too blunt for the curve of a number 3. Wiping it wastes paint and still may not restore the point. The fastest tool for reshaping it is already part of your body. You draw the bristles lightly between your lips. The hairs narrow. Then comes the working rhythm. Point, dip, paint. One fine point, one touch of the mixture, one fragment of a numeral. The technique is called lip pointing. It is taught, observed, and repeated around the room, not invented as one worker's strange habit. After a few strokes, the brush spreads again. Your mouth restores it again. A clean dial keeps the piecework moving. A messy one can cost time, paint, or acceptance. Records do not give one universal number of dials or mouth contacts for every painter. They do show the industrial pattern, tray after tray, day after day, precision recreated by the same small movement. Your mouth is no longer beside the tool. It has become part of the tool. But the lips are only the clearest route. You also handle the mixture and the objects around it. Powder can settle near the vessel. Paint reaches fingers, tools, benches, and clothing. Mixing and disturbed residue can put material into the air. It does not need to form a dramatic cloud. Ordinary work is enough to move small traces from container to brush, from brush to hand, and from bench to body. Not every surface carries the same amount, and no record can tell us the exact dose received by a worker at this bench. The important fact is simpler. The job does not maintain a clean border between the luminous material and the person using it. Yet the room offers almost no immediate warning. The paint does not burn your skin. A mouth contact does not produce instant pain. You can finish a beautiful dial, pass inspection, and become better at the job, while the exposure remains impossible to feel. Elsewhere in the same operation, radioactive material can be treated very differently. Historical records describe technical workers using some combination of forceps, containers, shielding, distance, or monitoring. The exact equipment and timing vary, and not every technical worker has every protection. Even so, the contrast is hard to miss. In one part of the system, distance from the material is useful. At the painter's benches, closeness is rewarded, and the mouth helps shape the brush. The same material moves through two different cultures of care. Some workers who questioned the practice were reassured that it was safe. That does not give us one universal speech or a simple picture of what every manager understood in 1920. Early warnings existed, scientific knowledge was still developing, and responsibility would remain contested for years. But whatever knowledge existed elsewhere, a clear and consistent warning did not reach the woman putting the brush between her lips. Once radioactive material enters the body, the danger changes location. Some swallowed or inhaled material may leave again. Some can enter the bloodstream and deposit especially in bone. It does not have to remain visible to remain radioactive. It can continue exposing nearby tissue from inside. That is internal exposure. The source is no longer across the room or inside a container. It travels with you. The distinction matters. Protection based on distance works only while the source stays outside. Once material is retained in bone, there is no bench to step away from, and no pair of forceps that can put space between it and living tissue. Dose, duration, and individual outcomes vary greatly. Not every dial painter develops the same disease, and not every contact produces the same result. But the delay is exactly what makes this work so deceptive. The watch leaves the factory. The shift disappears into memory. Material retained in the body can remain after both are gone, creating damage without giving the worker a clock she can see. Years later, the opening question becomes visible in real people. Molly Maggia, a former orange dial painter, developed severe problems in her mouth and teeth. Wounds failed to heal. Her jaw deteriorated catastrophically. A tooth could be removed, yet the surrounding injury did not close as an ordinary dental wound should. Other workers developed dental injury, anemia, bone damage, and, in later patterns, radiation-related cancers. These were not interchangeable outcomes, and they did not happen to every painter, but they were no longer one person's unexplained bad luck. In 1924, dentist Theodore Blum described unusual jaw disease in a luminous dial painter and helped identify an occupational pattern. The condition would become associated with jaw necrosis, tissue and bone failing to heal and dying. The delicate brush in the opening has now reached its documented consequence. What is still missing is proof strong enough to connect a finished factory task to an illness appearing years later. That proof developed in stages. A Harvard team investigated the orange workplace in 1924, examining both lip pointing and exposure through the air. The question moved from the dental chair back into the factory. What route joined the material on the bench to the damage in the body? Conflict followed over the findings, and publication came in 1925. That same year, medical work led by Harrison Martland connected the painter's jaw injuries and anemia with radioactive material taken into the body. Instruments made the argument harder to dismiss. In a period electroscope, radiation made a charged instrument lose its charge. The movement of its indicator gave investigators a way to detect what a person could not see or feel. This worker's body was no longer only the subject of a disputed story. It could become physical evidence. But measurement arrived after the exposure, after the delay, and for some women, after their health had already collapsed. Scientific evidence opened a door. It did not make that door easy to cross. Grace Fryer had worked at the orange plant during its early years. She and 4 other sick women pressed claims against U.S. Radium while their conditions worsened. The same delay that concealed the danger now worked against them in law. A statute of limitations is a legal clock. Wait too long after an injury, and the right to bring a claim can expire. But how do you meet that deadline when the injury may not reveal its cause for years? In June 1928, the 5 women reached an out-of-court settlement that included compensation and medical support. It was important, but it was not a complete courtroom victory, and most painters received no comparable payment. Later litigation could still end differently. In the Laporte case, a federal court rejected fraudulent concealment and treated that claim as time-barred. Measurement could show what remained in a body. It could not guarantee justice. The dial painter's evidence helped shape later radiation measurement and protection practices. Distance, containment, monitoring, and control of internal contamination became harder to treat as optional details. The evidence also made one principle impossible to ignore. A worker can leave the factory while an industrial exposure remains inside her body. Their cases contributed to a much larger history of industrial hygiene and radiation standards. They did not directly create one modern agency, and they did not single-handedly create OSHA. The legacy is broader and less tidy than that. Recognition improved the systems available to later workers, but it could not restore damaged bone or compensate everyone who had already been exposed. The contamination also outlived the factory era. The former Orange operation eventually became a Superfund cleanup site. Long after the benches and trays were gone, the material still demanded containment. Return to the paper dial in front of you. The last numeral is clean. The tray can move on. By every visible measure, you have done the job correctly. That is what makes the hidden shift so cruel. The workers were not endangered because they failed at precision. Precision made the contact repeatable. Piecework made speed valuable. Obedience made it ordinary. The brush approaches your lips because the product requires a finer point. The finished watch leaves the factory and keeps readable time. What remains inside an exposed worker can start a different clock, one nobody at the bench yet knows how to read.